Before we get started with today's interview, just a quick reminder, click the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and ding the bell so that you don't miss any of the great interviews that we have coming up. Now, on to today's interview. Welcome back. Today I have a really special guest with me. I am so excited to have a little bit of time today with Martha Hill Duncan. Martha, welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Sam. Great to see you.
All right. I want to open by asking you some questions about you and your compositional journey. So tell me, did you come from a musical family?
I grew up in Texas, in Houston, as you know, and definitely a musical family. My mother played the piano by ear, and the rest of the family loved music, and my mother sang all the time.
Oh, very good. And what were your earliest experiences in music?
My first experience with music was with my father and my mother, listening to the radio, listening to jazz at night or classical music, me asking a lot of questions, my dad trying to answer, in his way. And the very first time I ever tried an instrument was at a friend's house down the street, and she had a beautiful grand piano, and her father was a real classical music fanatic. And she was a few years older than me, and she sat me down at the piano. I was probably about 6 or 7, and she put my little hands up on the piano and my little thumbs together on middle C and showed me a little something, and then she moved me to the C position. I know this now. I didn't know what was going on then, of course. It was Suzuki at the beginning, she didn't know that, but watch me, copy me, and I just couldn't get enough of it. I just went home immediately and said, I have to have a piano. That's my life. That's it. I got to have it. So my parents, they weren't particularly well off. They made that happen, and, the rest is history, as they say.
Wow. That's a really neat sort of musical origin story. When did you start composing, and how did you start composing? What were your first steps in that journey?
My first experience in ever writing music down on paper was with my piano teacher when I was young, maybe 8. And I was not a great practicer. I'd go home and forget to practice until the day before. My parents had no clue of being the great piano parents that we have now. And I'd always panic the night before, and I'd go into my lesson. She was very sweet, very encouraging. But she said, if you're going to change all the endings and make it different, you're not honoring the composer's wishes. And she handed me a little, landscape book of scores, the ones we had with full of paper, staff paper. And she said, if you're not going to follow the directions on the page, go home and write your own compositions. So I went home and I got a pencil and I wrote something down, and it was, I'm sure I have it still. My mom kept it. And I went back to that piano lesson and I gave it to her, and she set it up on the, fallboard, the desk, and she played it, and it was almost perfect the way I imagined it. And I was just set. I just thought that was magic. I don't know if I became a better pianist because of that, but I certainly knew that I wanted to make music.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And it's so interesting to me, as I have been speaking to many different composers through the course of these interviews, what a common theme that is, that I wasn't a good student. I was so interested in doing my own thing and changing what was there. So I love that that's also part of your story. So besides that first piano teacher who really gave you that opportunity, who nurtured you as a composer?
Well, I was able to go to the high school, the first graduating class of the High School for Performing and Visual Arts in Houston. I think it was the second in the country at that point. And it had just started out, and I was seeing, big music names come through every week because they wanted to be with this high school, for performing artists. I'd watch these composers come in, and there was a particular one who opened up the lid of the piano and put his head inside and was demonstrating all this stuff, the special effects of a prepared piano. And I thought, oh, I want to crawl inside that piano. So that was some of the earlier, contemporary compositional techniques I saw. And also in high school, I also studied with an arranger composer. Just so happened that was my piano teacher, and he was, arranging popular tunes. And So I think I got a feel for, chordal accompaniment and making up your own. It just felt natural to me to be creative with the piano.
Who inspires you today?
My students, my colleagues. As you know, I'm working with Red Leaf Piano Works, and we're a collective of composers, and we're all struggling to, be creative and imaginative and bring new ideas to music. And it's very, very inspiring to watch my colleagues work. And I love new composers, young composers just starting out. It's so exciting to see what they've got going here.
Oh, that's excellent. What are some of the most important things that challenged you and caused you to become a better composer?
Where I live now, I'm very isolated. It's a small town in Ontario, and there is a university, but I wasn't associated with the university. I was an independent piano teacher, and I think being on my own made me have to be more, more in touch with how I was feeling about what I wanted to create. It also limited my access to what was going on in a big city if I'd lived in a big city where there was lots of music. So I really think that my voice or my compositional output is so different because I have so much time in my own little place.
That's really fascinating. You touched on it a minute ago, but I'm interested to know, as I played through all of your compositions, they have a wide variety of sounds, but yet there's this sort of sound that is uniquely yours. What are some things that you did to help discover your voice as a composer and to develop that style that sets your works apart from other composers?
Well, I think I was always attracted to Debussy. I think there's a lot of impressionistic stuff in my writing. I can't help it. That was really my first exposure to serious music was Debussy. I love melody. I'm a singer, so I think there's a lot of melody line in my writing. The other thing is that I have small hands, and I've taught a lot of very talented students with small hands. So I think I look at the keyboard a little differently than somebody who has, big paws, trying to get that big keyboard orchestral sound without having to make big stretches and big, chords, using a lot of crossed hand work and a lot of pedal. I know that I have a lot of generous pedal. I just love that the sound of the pedal. It's a big effect in my writing. And also as a young student, I felt like the thing that really excited me about the piano was the ability to be able to do very quick changes of louds to softs, all those special effects. And I think I have a lot of that in my music because I know that turns on my students because they feel like they have a personal expression when they get to those kinds of places. They do it just the way they want to do it rather than like everybody else. So always this need to be expressive, communicative. I definitely feel that when I'm composing.
Very good. Where do you seek inspiration for your compositions?
Nature, titles, deadlines, rhythm. Those kinds of things really get me going. I think in big terms. I like to really get into a developmental kind of phase. I don't enjoy writing just a one-off piece. I really like thinking of themes, and I just love really getting deep into that zone. And when I'm not at the computer or the piano writing, but I'm thinking about it, walking, it's just cooking inside my brain. I just love living in those different worlds during that time when I'm writing.
Oh, that's really cool. So tell me, what role do restrictions play in your composing?
I always want if I'm writing for students or, I want it to be pedagogically sound. So if I'm writing for a little one, I'm going to try to stay away from any large stretches or too intricate, fast notes. I think new players want something dramatic though. So sometimes I'll write something that might be a little bit more challenging, but a teacher could easily teach it to them by rote. It's physically not challenging, but notationally it's hard to see. So I try to make sure that I'm not denying those young players exciting moments just because it looks hard on the page. So I think that a lot of my early writing, I'm thinking mostly reading, but a little bit of rote by the teacher. So I try to notationally make it easy, but still exciting for the students. So that to me is my job, is to make it exciting, draw them in, want them to work on it and play it and be expressive, but not so visually scary that they just keep turning the page. So I love that. I love that. I love that challenge of making it notationally easy to see.
That's beautiful. Tell me, how do you, when you're composing, how do you avoid the pitfalls that befall many composers in a really difficulty starting something new, or a million things that are started but inability to finish a composition? How do you avoid some of those pitfalls?
Well, it's really funny you should ask about that, because of course we just went through this terrible thing called COVID. But it was such an opportunity for me to go into my closet where I had stored all these little starts of, songs, piano compositions. So I used COVID to pretty well clear out all those unfinished opuses, So it was fantastic. Every day I'd get up. It was like being on a long-term sabbatical for me. Every day I'd get up and say, well, what are we going to do today? And what's missing? So I cleared out all of that, wreckage of the past, I call it, and turned it into something usable, so that, there's a little bit of guilt. I don't know. I'm not a quilter, but I hear quilters talking about the unfinished quilt in the closet, all this fabric I've not, attended to, storage and all that. And definitely as a composer, I felt like I had a lot of layers of things that were unfinished, started, that I knew were great ideas, but at the time something came up and I got distracted. So it was like a huge weight off me to get rid of a lot of those things, and it like clearing out all that stuff in the past.
If you were advising someone who is an up-and-coming composer who's attempting to make connections with a music publisher,
Yeah.
What advice would you give that up-and-coming composer?
Yeah, when I started out, I sent in all my, in my late 20s, but at the time, the publishers in that era, they were so full. They were so they had so many wonderful composers. I'd get these lovely letters of rejection. We love your work. We have no space for you. Try this, try that. It was very discouraging. And your first impulse is to give up because, well, if I don't have a publisher, how can I be a composer? But I think things have really changed. I think all composers are self-publishing now with the internet and the advance of all the software that's out there. There is absolutely no reason for us not to compose. The cool thing about self-publishing is that I can write something today and have it in somebody's hands tomorrow. I don't have to wait for this long, timeline of waiting till everybody gets into the queue for the publisher and get out there. And of course, the disadvantage of being with a publisher is you normally lose your rights. So all that beautiful music that you have written belongs to somebody else. If that publisher goes out of business, who knows what's happened to it. So I am definitely a composer of the post-publishing mindset. I think of being creative as my own responsibility, and if I want people to hear it, I'm going to get it out there. I'm going to get students to play it. And that feels very different. I'm answering only to myself. I'm not answering to somebody who says, well, we've got lots of, beginner music. We need some more intermediate. Well, no, I'm into writing beginner right now, and also advanced works that probably would never be, have any place because they don't sell as well as the beginner books, So I feel very grateful that, unfortunately, due to all those rejections, I never had a really, typical publisher. But now certainly I found my place in this collective model that we have with Red Leaf Piano Works.
What advice would you give to an aspiring young composer who's at the very beginning of their career?
Yeah. I think that for me, the best thing I ever did was to associate with other composers. Composing is a very lonely business. And, when I was in my early 30s, I, got in touch with a composer here in Kingston, a mutual piano teacher, and we started working together. And that was it was like having therapy, for your compositional needs, because it is a creative, pursuit. And also you have to have a lot of pride and ego to be a composer because, it's like, how dare you think that this is worth me playing? Or it's a hard slog, but the more you do it, the more you feel like, well, this is just what I do. I'm not here to get your judgment or your approval. It's just what I do for a living, just like somebody who teaches students. And the more you compose, the more you realize that this is just your way of expressing yourself, and it doesn't have to be met by somebody else's personal, approbation or whatever.
I love that. That's awesome. That is very cool. I read your CV, and I know you do a lot of different things, from teaching to conducting to performing to composing. What are your thoughts about having a career where you do multiple different things?
Well, when I meet people nowadays, it seems like they can't make a living as a musician without being able to do all these different things, right? In the old days, I thought, okay, I can be a piano teacher and make a living. Well, that's great. But then, as you get older, you can't keep as many students. You want to have time for your composing. So you get into something else. You do more master classes and adjudicating festivals and things like that and you want to keep up your own skills of performing, and you want to perform, which is, I love the conducting and I love the singing and working with singers. And, everybody I talk to seems to have, lots of irons in the fire to keep a decent level of income. And isn't it great that we get to do all these things to make our lives, work?
Absolutely. There's something really good about having all of that diversity and having the privilege of getting to do multiple different things. So, Martha Hill Duncan, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us today. I really appreciate all of the wisdom, all of the insights you've shared into your awesome compositions. And I know many students throughout the entire United States are going to really enjoy playing your pieces at their Federation festivals this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sam.